Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whisky podcast. I'm joined today, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, my business partner, Jason Three Names, Dram Golf, short-haired, white-haired, golfer, lover of sandwiches, nefarious, lustful.
Boo!
With the good, the ever-wonderful Jason Johnston Yellen.
Oh, thank you. Always lovely to be here. I for a millisecond, I thought you were going to go with the ever-young Jason Johnston Yellen, but you did not allow yourself that. So the evergreen.
Ever white. Can I ask a question of you?
Of me? Okay.
Well, no, I'm not asking a favor of you. I'm asking a question of you.
A question of
because I did say that you were the person voted most likely to eat a sandwich. But my question to you is, going through whatever you would call high school in Scotland. What is high school called in Scotland?
Oh gosh, now I'm really on the spot. Well, I went to Carrick Academy, and so Academy was the high school portion of that.
What kind of academy?
Carrick. That was the name of the region. Carrick Academy.
Okay, Carrick Academy. So in graduating there or going through there, right, I imagine you had a yearbook. Did you have like a...
I was editor of the school yearbook.
Okay, so did you have...
The very first time it was ever offered.
The position was offered and you took it up?
First time the yearbook was ever offered at our school.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. That's very interesting. That just isn't a thing in Scotland? Just, no yearbooks?
Hadn't been, that was what? We had made it as far as 1991/92 without it. And then it happened.
Okay, so... Here
this
in the
good stuff. This is top shelf material here. Top shelf.
Well, the reason I'm asking is,
we should go back to sandwiches.
For my high school yearbook, I was the class clown, right? And so you had the two couple that were voted, the prettiest, the most handsome, the smartest, Did you
just say the two couple?
Didn't you say the two people?
The two couple?
No, the two people. Did I say the two couple?
You might have said the two couple. Yeah, carry on anyway. I don't want to derail this fascinating story. So yes.
My point is, and the more I talk, the more I realize this is getting less and less interesting. Simply because you're making it harder and harder for me to just ask my damn question.
You are welcome. I think the question has passed. I don't think this is a lead up to a question.
None shall pass, Jason. So, did you have in your yearbook, these people are voted most likely for this, voted least likely for that? You didn't have that?
No. It was really just a retelling, a recapping of the school year. So yeah. It was photographs of all the various years in the school. It was the sports that was going on. It was any charitable things that had been happening over the last year. Potentially photos of the teachers. I think we just went with a group photo of the teachers. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to interact with the teachers one-on-one to get a portrait of them. It was a lot of work, and I wasn't particularly good at it. And I procrastinated a lot.
Oh, that really checks out.
And I remember the night before the deadline, my very good friend Shirley, who I was dating at the time, and her mother, who I wasn't, were both feverishly helping me gather all the materials for the deadline. So, yeah, that was a fun little memory. And then as a thank you, I put her mom's name into the yearbook as a thank you for her assistance, and misspelled her first name. And so she was a Jenny,
yeah,
and I spelled it with a Y, and she was Jenny with an IE.
Or
vice versa, Look,
did she have a long time ago. She have the heart over the I?
Let me just say she was a Jennifer. Let me just leave it at that.
Okay.
Can I also say, just as we're mentioning the old sandwiches here, Mo did reach out to say it was her great honor to be a part of the sandwich episode. So it has entered into lore already. And now we're revisiting. We're revisiting the lore. It's a lot.
So I guess my question then would be, if you did have those, like, what category do you think you would have fit into? What would you have been voted most likely to be doing?
Most likely to end up teaching, because we don't graduate from school
all
in
fail?
Scotland. You just you just stop going. You just reach a date where they're like, that's the end of that. That was fun. And I went until the last possible moment, and then I kept going. And so, like, we were into the summer months, and the teachers were just like, you have to stop coming here. Like, this isn't your school anymore. And so off I went, doing my Charlie Brown walk into the Carrick Hills.
Oh, wow.
Because I wasn't allowed to go to school anymore. So
okay. So
yeah.
You would have been voted most likely to teach. So you loved it. You enjoyed going to school.
Or to become a janitor, right? I just liked going to school. I just liked being in the building. It was a good place to be. Yeah. And I feel like I've had this conversation with you along the way, but there's always that guy who keeps returning to high school, like into his 20s, and he's the guy getting beer for everybody, and he's the guy buying the smokes for everybody. Yeah. And you hang out with that guy because you're getting what you want, but at the same time you're thinking, what a total loser, right? I never became that person, but mostly because the teachers intervened and said, okay, you gotta go. You gotta go somewhere else.
I was about to name mine until you uttered the words, what a total loser. And then I got the fear that he may somehow be listening to our podcast, and I imagine he can still kick my ass if he wanted to.
I can't believe you were like, oh, that mid-20s dude who buys us all this stuff and we are 16, like, that guy's amazing. Love that guy. That guy should be at every party.
Yeah, no, I just felt that I would have gotten beat up if I didn't. Like, he would just come and be that guy coming to school, and like you had to and I'll just throw a name. Let's call him Lance, right? Because it's got to be like, if someone's coming, his name's Lance, and I've got to give him his proper due, right? It's like he comes, he's got the ring, you kiss the ring, or else you get beat up.
Did he bring all the booze? Did he bring all the smokes?
He brought smokes. Yeah, so my year was the last year. So here's an interesting thing, and Jason, I don't know if you had this.
I'll be the judge of that.
It was interesting. You trust me on that. My freshman year was which was 1987, was the last year that student smoking was allowed. So there was a separate area for kids to smoke. And so then come 1988, that had gone away. And so Lance would be the one to you meet him out back, get a pack of smokes.
This guy was such a douchebag.
He had his Rush shirt on and his leather jacket.
No offense to Rush fans or leather jacket wearers. Here we are, Joshua. Here we are. No, I still distinctly remember. So because we go to high school for a maximum of 6 years, my freshman year was 1986. And there was no smoking allowed on school grounds. Now, it didn't mean it wasn't happening in classic fashion behind the bike sheds.
Yeah.
Right? There were definitely groups of kids who smoked behind the bike sheds, and we knew who those kids were. But it's not like they had an administration-approved smoking area. So that's remarkable.
Well, it happens now, and I hear this from my oldest daughter. It's like smoking still happens, but it's vaping. And how do you know kids are vaping? Because it smells like cotton candy in the bathroom, or watermelon bubble gum, or whatever, insert vaping sent here.
Cinnamon.
Yeah, right? And that's the telltale, that you just go in, and there's CCTV in there.
In the bathrooms?
Not in the bathrooms, but outside, right? So you can see who's going in, when they went in. So if a teacher goes in and smells it, they can sort of pinpoint potentially, which kid did it.
See, that's why I prefer boozing at school, because then it's just hip flask in your blazer pocket, quick nip. Nobody knows anything. Wait a second. Hashtag, please drink responsibly.
Hashtag, what kids are wearing blazers to schools these days?
Oh, yeah. No, the school uniform. I talk to my boys all the time about wearing a school uniform. I wore a tie every day of my schooling career from 5 years of age to 18.
Is that because you were at an academy, or is just that was it? All kids.
Yeah, just school has a school uniform. Yeah,
kind of like in the In-Betweeners.
Exactly like the In-Betweeners. What a show! What a wonderful thing to revisit years later and say, it was all as horrible as I remember, even though I didn't want to leave.
Do you think
that's a hell of a show?
Oh, it's a hell of a show. Yeah, I started sharing clips with Chris and Joe. Not with my kids. I'm not sharing. Are you kidding me?
Like, what clips did you show your daughters?
No, oh my gosh, none of it. No, just to some friends. Yeah. So now I've got a question for you. Given our guests today, we've got Boutique Dave Worthington.
Yes.
And
from deepest Mid-Bedfordshire.
And then we've got Sam Simmons, who I don't think he doesn't go by Boutique Sam. He's just Sam Simmons.
I always think of him as Boutique Sam.
Do you think of him as Boutique Sam? Interesting.
I do. Well, let's be perfectly honest.
All right.
We both think of him as Dr. Whiskey.
Let's
be perfectly honest 100%.
About this. And it's funny. I went back to his... I revisit the Dr. Whiskey blog every now and again. And as I was editing the audio from our conversation from March, I think we were recording in earlier March, I said, it's been a while since I went back. So he had a post in November 2021, something like that. And then before that was 2014. Talk about a hiatus. But what I want to ask you is, because we're going to end this podcast with a bit of a game, which I'm really excited about. And we'll talk about that a bit more later. But I want to play a game with you just now. Given the content of our conversation, you and I, Jason, are now the committee, the chairs of our whiskey yearbook. And we have got to vote Sam Simmons and Dave Worthington in, because they're about to graduate. So my question to you is, what would you vote Dave Worthington most likely or least likely? And how about Sam? And I'll have my own answers.
Dave Worthington, most likely to captain a pirate ship.
Okay. Oh, I like that. Yeah.
Sam Simmons, most likely to leave a high-profile, high-ranking job to follow a passion.
Oh, man. What I loved about that setup before to follow a passion is you could have gone snarky there. You could have done anything, but you nailed it. I like that.
Pro level. Yeah, follow those two. I'm quite proud of those two.
Wow.
You could tell I was editor of a yearbook once. It just comes so naturally to me. So naturally.
So I would vote Dave Worthington most likely to wear a bowler hat unironically.
It suits his face. He wears it well.
He really does. It's nice, and he's trimmed down a bit too, right? So he looks a bit like Slim Gangster
dashing
with it. Yeah, like a dashing bowler hat wearing gangster.
But you could also imagine him in that Jack Sparrow tri-point pirate hat, You could imagine him in that just as easily.
Oh, easily, right? Because put an eye patch on him as well. Like, even remove one of his legs, replace it with a...
Take away a leg.
Right?
I was just going to say that, yeah.
Right.
Give him a wooden leg.
Give him a hook. Give him a
Give him a parrot. We clearly view Dave in the exact same way here, so... Much love, Dave. Much love.
And I would vote Sammy Simmons. Most likely, you ready for this? Mm-hmm. Most likely to tell it like it is in the form of a song.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes. That brings in both his truth-telling powers
Yes.
and his musicality.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, I like that.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's, I've talked about this previously, but I think that's one of the ways in which he influenced us way back in the day was Dr. Whisky was one of 3 whiskey bloggers out there, and he was known for having opinions. He was known for presenting the industry as it was, and perhaps sharing sometimes how he'd like it to be. And so, I've always liked that about him. I've always admired that about him. And he's always had a sense of humor around it as well. I forget the reason for it, but clearly you can't forget the picture. Him in the bathtub.
Oh, yes.
On Dr. Whisky.
Oh, yeah. Just having a bath, a soak in whiskey. And I tell you, I'm just thinking about his pee-pee hole and his butthole and how that must have hurt, even at 40% alcohol. Like, I wanted to ask him the questions about his pee-pee hole, but, here we are.
I'm so glad we put in the work to clean that up.
So,
yeah. So what do you think about Sam Simmons' penis?
But really quickly to the point of Sam and his truth telling, there was a bit of the conversation that really struck me, and he talked about his time when he was with the Balvenie, and it was a bit of a struggle for him to convince the higher ups that his job wasn't to just talk about Balvenie, but his job was to talk about Scotch whiskey. And his point was, Balvenie is not the brand. Aberlour is not the brand. Macallan is not the brand. Scotch whiskey is the brand, and that's what you talk about. And they really let him champion that, I'm sure, after a good bit of fight, to the point where they created a Balvenie app where you can store your whiskey collection in an app, and it didn't have to have just Balvenie whiskeys. It could just be all your whiskeys. And think about how forward thinking that is from a big company to allow something like that. Like, that really takes his truth telling to a really high level.
Well, and I think it's one of the privileges that we get to enjoy as independent bottlers is we're champions of Scotch, we're champions of world single malt, champions of American single malt, bourbons, ryes, mezcals, right? We get to ride entire categories and then tell stories about these producers. And unlike being a single producer where you're telling the same story day in and day out, we get to run the gamut there. And that's kind of what I mean in my award for Sam there, is you can clearly be passionate about your home brand. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But when you then get to come out and champion a world of spirits, I just think that's where Sam lives. And that's what Sam's been doing since he kicked it all off as Dr. Whisky. And Dave too, right? And our listeners will hear this in the interview today. When you hear Dave start to talk about the producers that they work with, they interact with in the before times they got to go visit, like, you hear the enthusiasm, the excitement, the passion. And I don't think you can really be a successful independent bottler without feeling that passion. It's too hard, as we covered in the last extra. Like it's too hard of a landscape to not be passionate about.
And that's what you hear in talking with these two when they're talking about boutique whiskey. And we touch on boutique rum and boutique gin, but the focus was mostly on whiskey, and just hearing them talk passionately about, you know, the rye project and different American ryes and European ryes and you know, hearing, I think it was Dave mentioning Copper Sea Distillery out of New York using direct fire stills, like just getting geeky about a distillery that was getting geeky about their production and wanting to share that information. So anyway, we can go on and on about, you know, why we voted these two for what we voted them for. But I think that it's best just to hand the conversation off. Quickly before we do, this conversation is split in a way in two parts. We've got the bulk of the conversation that we're about to go into, but then we play a little game, which we're going to put at the very end of the episode after our news segment and after a few other comments here and there. So that was a load of fun. Just watching Sam Simmons react to the fact that he was about to play a game, that in and of itself was super fun.
Welcome to the podcast, gentlemen. It has taken us far too long to get both of you on here. But as sometimes happens in this wild and crazy world of ours, we have the opportunity to say happy 5th birthday to Boutique Gin. Am I right in saying that?
I'm nodding.
Okay. That's okay.
Oh, yeah, I can hear it.
That looked more like keep hanging yourself, Johnston Yellen. You are going down the wrong path here. So, but Boutique itself is more like 10 years old. Is that correct? Has that happened this year? Is that happening later this year?
Yeah, our 10th birthday will be September the 12th is when we first announced the Boutique lineup to the world. Okay. September the 12th, 10 years ago this year. So, yeah, we've done quite a bit since.
So there's the boutique single malts. There's clearly the gin having a birthday. There's the rum. There's the World Series that you did. Yes. So just, you know, not necessarily very quickly, but just in terms of a framing, can you articulate Bookie? I just reminded it me. I got to go down and place my bets later this afternoon. Can you frame Boutique for us and for the listeners? And then I absolutely want to ask you about the World Series, because I thought your nomenclature on that was fantastic, and I think what you're trying to achieve there is fantastic. And it's near and dear to what Joshua and I are obviously, you know, trying to achieve and what we're doing. So I think we've got points in common here. But first of all, Dave, could you frame Boutique for us?
Oh, you're just passionate whiskey geeks, much like yourselves, that are independent bottlers. And it was always about great whiskey right from the start. We weren't snobs in terms of it must be single malt, it must be, you know, it's only single malts, it's only Scottish. But, you know, we launched, what did we launch the business with? We did go with probably two of the most collectible single malts with an Ardbeg and a Macallan, and then two closed distilleries with Port Ellen and Cappadonic. So we did sort of start...
That's a murderer's row right there.
It is, yeah. But we realised pretty quickly that blends really did put us on the map with our blended Scotch number one that went on and won the world's best Scotch whiskey at the time. That really did put us on the map. And we started bottling world whiskey pretty quickly. I think our first batch of world whiskey was actually from the States, with some few bourbon, was back in 2014. But we have gone on and bottled whiskey from right around the world. We just launched a new series just last week, the Norwest Euro Express, which is sort of a whistle-stop tour amongst Norwest European distilleries. Single malts, one we can't call whiskey. I think you might call it whiskey over there because it's made from buckwheat. You have buckwheat whiskey over there. We can't call it whiskey over here.
Yeah.
And a couple of banging ryes from Finland. Yeah. So yeah, right across the world.
Jason, I know you've got a follow-up question, but just specifically to this, because I love that you create these series. And my question, because we do the same in a much smaller scale, but I wonder, it's obvious you create a series and you have a path. Do people follow you along in that series? Are they paying attention in the way that you put it out? Does that question make sense?
It does, and this might be too early to say. I think, Dave, you should paint some context of not a mess, but how many bottlings we ended up having after a while there. So Boutique used to be released just in monthly outturns, and sometimes things would get bottled, and Dave would have no idea it's even been bottled. So Dave, maybe just set a little context, man.
I'd be away and come back and, you bottled that, did you? You'd been nice to have known that's come out. Yeah, we did. We grew organically, grew slowly. It really was. Right at the beginning, it was just, first year maybe 25 different batches of bottlings, basically, and then in 2017 or 16, it was like 60 releases that came out, and then we opened our own bottling plant in Edinburgh, and that sort of put a bottleneck in the bottling line for a little while because it went down. And then 2018-19 went absolutely crazy, and we were just bottling everything. And I was coming back, and there's another release because the way Boutique is buy the whiskey, get it in a bottle. We didn't have that facility to hold whiskey for too long. It's expensive business being an independent bottler. Buying whiskey, there's all your cash tied up in this big lump here. You want to get that bottled and sold as quickly as possible so you can buy the next cask. And that's what was snowballing. And all of a sudden, it was just gaining momentum. The bottling facility, when we first had it, didn't allow us to store anything there, didn't allow us to do much at all, but the licenses have sort of expanded on that. We have to have different licenses for holding stock or for blending stock, and now we've got all that in our control. We have more control of when we release it. And the other thing that was coming out, we were releasing so much, it was just overwhelming for somebody. Do you want to stock some Boutique? Yeah, I'd love to stock. What have you got? And the list what is this? It just. I recognise some of these distilleries, but just how many Macallans have you got? How many Milton Duff? Yeah, it was just bonkers. So back in early 2000, we decided 2020. We decided that as a company, as a group, as a brand, that we really needed to start putting some context in this and bringing them together with some sort of loose. I say loose theme around it. We make this up as we go along. We didn't know what we were doing, but trying to create the themes with each release. And the idea is to do one a quarter, and we're slowly building up to that. To give people around the world to get it to their markets at the right time, so we can all launch it together and talk about the same thing at the same time. And really just to put the full package of information as an independent bottler to why we're bottling these whiskies in this series. So yes, we started with the World Series. That was back in August 2020.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gosh,
I don't think I could have given you a year on that one. Wow.
First time we did a series with all the bells and whistles, and we just put a little package of scotch together at that time alongside it. So we do release scotch at the same time. So I think there's just 2 batches there, and that was the Orthrusk 37 and Tomatin 36-year-old that we released at that time. And then we've gone on and we did a rye series. So there's 9 rye whiskies, and then we went to Australia, which I think was I think the rye series was incredibly brave. 9 rye whiskies from around the world, 5 from the US. Very, very different styles. All of them very different styles, from malted ryes to direct fired stills to all sorts of different things coming through there. And they say we've gone on and done Australia. We've done home nations, so all the rugby man, England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales. Sadly, there was only one Welsh distillery that we could grab hold of, and as we bottled Scotch all the time, it really was mostly backed up by English whiskey. But we're so just done the Norwest Euro Express, which is cracking collection of whiskies.
So as you're piecing this together, and as you're now planning, and I love what you're saying about taking control of the bottling line, being able to say, okay, for a year each quarter, here's how we parse this out. 9 ryes. Was there a moment in a meeting when someone said, you've lost your collective minds? Like, how the hell are we going to pull off 9 ryes? Or did you know that Boutique had enough of a following with enough of a geeky group that 9 ryes was going to be an easy sell or challenging in different ways? How did that look for you all?
Well, I thought it was going to be challenging. As a rye lover, I absolutely love rye whiskey, and I love the challenges that it has and the differences that we had. And some of them were a little bit more challenging to some people, I'm sure. But overall, I think the series went pretty good. We did a launch. We launched that just before lockdown really came in, wasn't it? There was lots of advocacy going around, so we were out there with it. It was because we got locked down. It didn't do. We wanted it in the whiskey bars. Is where we wanted it to be. That was the idea, because it's just great whiskey for cocktails. There's so much in a rye, but I think the following of some of these distilleries, certainly the Tennessee rye disappeared almost instantly from what I remember, and so did most of Astounding, the Danish rye. A lot of these little distilleries have quite a big following around them. Even here, they know they make great whiskey from. It hasn't done too bad at all, the rye. I think I did my fair share of helping them out as well, at drinking as many as possible.
The hard work there, yeah.
Well, Sam put together a Rye Blend, which was really cool in that series, because we put I think it's the first ever I've ever seen a blended American. All these distilleries, named distilleries, 9 distilleries from Empire State. So all Empire ryes blended together to put the first ever Empire Rye Blend. And that's just a cracking whiskey.
That's a wild idea.
It came from them.
I've never heard of that either.
It came from the Distillers.
Okay.
Yeah, from the Distillers. It was sort of their concept with our buddy Jonathan Wingo, who was working with us at the time. They put the plan together, and they said they had tried to do something like that, but I think a lot of craft distillers or egos or different opinions, at least in the room, it was too difficult, and they trusted us to do it, and that was really cool. And yes, please. And it just drives back, if I can, to your earlier question. We're trying to do cool shit, and when you're dumping out 100 bottles every month, 100 new lines every month, it's unlikely you're actually doing cool shit. And if you are, the people who care aren't going to notice. So you're right, there is a risk in slowing down. And yes, my neck was on the guillotine or whatever with our bosses, but we said, please, I've been working with whiskey for a while. I'm a whiskey consumer. We know our whiskey customer. At Balvenie, when I met you guys, we would take 3 years to launch a new product. And not because we're slow or stupid, but because we did it right. And sometimes it took time to find the right barrels to put into what kind of wood, or to get the design right, or work with the right craftspeople on the box, or whatever it was. Slow it down and do it right. So we were trying to do that. And we also have all been on buyer sides. And, when you work in a retailer, someone comes in with a list like that. You know what? I'm going to take nothing. Thank you. I don't have time to go through this massive list that's not in alphabetical order, that's not in price order, that I know there'll be no support for, because who can have time to support it? So we slowed things down. We said, to our masters, please give us 14 months, give us just a bit over a year, please, to prove if this works. Are we getting uptake? Yes. At least 50% would be allocated right out the door, and we weren't having that before. People were talking about it, check. People were writing about it, and most importantly, people were buying it. So, and we were able to actually build relationships and build support for each thing we were doing, and that's the best you can do. Otherwise, you're not really honoring. We source whiskeys, and you're not really honoring the people who are giving you their product if you're just dumping it in the market and moving along.
So before we move too far away from this Empire blend and you're bringing 9 ryes together, what flavors are you finding there? And how are you finding those flavors working with one another and bouncing off? And the reason I ask is I remember way back, 2009, 2010, Joshua and I were part of the Bloggers blend with Master of Malt. And getting all the samples in and putting those together. And it was so frustrating when you thought, I just need this one little bit of smoke now and I will have the perfect blend. And that little bit of smoke blew everything else you've done, out the water, and you had a completely different blend. I could imagine rye playing a similar game where a little bit can do maybe more than you want it to. What was that experience like?
Yeah, Dave's tasted most of these components independently because we did some deconstructions, I think, in the aftermath, right before lockdown. The aftermath of the launch. Yeah, awesome question, because that is, first of all, it's a totally new category. So, with Scotch, most of us have inherited knowledge from generations of people who've educated us as we got into whiskey, and they tell us, you want to use a nutty, meaty style to bring things together. You only want to use a drop of peat. A little bit of peat goes a long way. Don't forget to use certain space size for top notes and certain space size for body and certain space, these type of instructions or guidance that we have the benefit of 100 years of knowledge. There's about 8 years of knowledge in Empire Rye. So it was initially a superficial impression, like lay it down, get the samples in front of you. We did ask all the distillers, and all the distillers really knew how this was going to go. They tried to find makes or cast examples that were typical of their most consistent style, because craft distillers can go like this, they can try different experiments, but we wanted them to find things that we could repeat if necessary, and to trust the ingredients would be the component parts would be similar.
Sure.
I'm trying to, as we're speaking, I'm trying to be really sneaky and pull up the actual recipe, because you're absolutely right. There were some component parts, and I won't name them because they might be upset, they were
so different. I mean, really tasting them alongside each other. We did a couple of decon tastings when we were allowed out again, when we took over Milroy's for last year, didn't we? Took over Milroy's for a month. And we did September. We did a decon. So we tasted all 9 of the whiskies, and they all have something different to bring. I mean, really different to bring from the type of whiskies that they were doing. Like different grains, some of them were wheat in them, some of them had let's have a quick look at them. So 9 distilleries. Do we name all the 9 distilleries?
They proudly took part. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, 5 and 20 Spirits, Kings County Distillery, Coppersea, the distillery that I fell in love with, that direct fired stills in the middle of nowhere. I just visited them and just thought, this is such a cool place. Albany Distilling, Finger Lakes Distilling, Honeoye Falls Distillery, which I think has closed. They disappeared over last year. I think they disappeared early last year. New York Distilling, which we love because we bottled 3 batches of New York Distilling. Great rye whiskey, stunning rye whiskey, I think. And Stoutridge and Tuttletown, who started it all, really, I guess, bringing that whole New York rye. But some of them, so much rye, 100% rye, bits of barley, different maturations, different, say, mash bills, direct fired stills, given that. Yeah, there was so many variations. When you tasted them alongside each other, it was absolutely mind-boggling. You'd think they'd all be the same. They all come from the same state. They're all doing the same rules. And the flavour profiles were so different, weren't they, Sam?
Oh yeah, totally. But we did approach it back to sort of your question. We approached it in a Scotch way, where I built like a grain base. Which one's going to be the nice, flattering, flabby light to show all the nice curves of the bodies of the other whiskeys, and the whiskeys that were really strongly flavored. I think one of them only has 1.36%. In the total, in the final blend, 2.7%, 5%, 4%. So because they were that strong, I can remember a Kings County sample that was very woody, let's say. But then when you diluted it, when you just got it down to like tea, tea's actually it had all this floral and tea and grassy things. So by using a tiny amount in something that was like a base grain in Scotch blending terms, it really just came to life. But even just a tiny percentage. So it took that sort of approach. And I might crack one tonight. Dave, do you still have one?
Of the Empire.
Yeah.
I can make a blend. I've got all 9 here.
You got all the component parts. Yeah, all right. I'll send you the recipe. I think it's still around. I should get another bottle. This is reminding me. Anyway, thanks, guys.
Dave's over here with a sample bottle saying, if I just add 2.7% of this to my glass, this is going to be perfect. I'm going to totally pull this off. Oh, look at that. We're getting to see Dave's legs right now.
I know.
I thought he was just a man in a chair. I've seen him in that position for 2 years now, not seeing him in person. I actually thought he was a Dalek, but here we are.
Lucky I have trousers on today.
Don't spoil the mystery, Dave. Don't spoil the mystery.
So when you're creating this blend, are you taking time into consideration? Do you make the blends? Do you return to them after 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks? How do you, or do you just blend and you say, you know what, that's going to work?
Sam's busy looking out the window during this question.
Because you do release things, in a fast and furious manner, and so I wonder, if you need to take that into consideration at all.
The fact that we do things quickly and no one's going to let me have something married for 6 weeks? Is that what you're suggesting? Yeah, I think that is definitely a challenge. I mean, you could do micro vattings and leave it exposed to air in my room here, and that might emulate it a little bit. But yeah, I mean, look, some of it's sort of like you're a musician, Joshua. Like when you record live, it can feel amazing in the moment. And when you hear it back on tape, you're like, nope, that was no good. But more often, and I'm wearing a Neil Young shirt, more often the opposite happens where you get that first take when you're just warming up and something magical has happened. Don't fuck with it. Don't overdub. Don't touch it. And I think this is the fourth recipe for Empire Rye is the one that happened with. I banged out, I think, 6 in the first day, and then it was the fourth that we came back to, and Toby agreed blind. A bunch of our colleagues agreed blind that was the winner, so we just went with that.
That's awesome. Oh, this is such a good metaphor, such a good comparison. I like that. Well done, you.
Well, I don't think we do it too quickly now. I think we have stepped back a lot and slowed things right down because when did I first start talking about the Norwest series that we just launched? 6 months ago, 5 months ago. We're currently a couple of weeks ago, a month ago, maybe even more than that. Beginning of January, wasn't it? We we advised the sales team of our next series that's coming out at the end of May. And Pete and I tasted all our way through them. But before we got them, the team had tasted their way through them and picked the whiskies that we're going to do, and these are the bottling strengths that we're going to do. So, we're now working Q1, Q2 next year.
Yeah, exactly.
We're looking at releases out there. We've got a plan. That's a year out, which is crazy.
Yeah. So, which is very whiskey, isn't it? Whiskey has to be that way. To do whiskey well, you have to have lead time. But I got to tell you, it is like Dave suggests, it's a daily fight, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah. Well, sometimes you don't know what series you're talking about, do you? You're 2 back and 2 forward.
Time travel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think
you haven't got that one yet. We can't mention that. Yeah.
Right, and we've been talking global supply chain, right? And so even your best plans can fall victim to your supplier not having glass for you, or the label company now has a longer turnaround, or in the case of very recently here, just to be clear, we are recording in early March, and this episode is going out later than that, but you've just re-entered the US market at the perfect time for global shipping. So you had been in the US, and then you came out of the US, and now you're back in the US. Can for the benefit of our listeners, can you talk through that process? And what's always fascinating for me is, what did you learn being in the US, and has that affected or changed anything about the re-entry to the US?
Well, Dave, maybe you can speak about our first toe dipping with Boutique in the US.
Well, certainly the response that we had in the US, wherever we went, was amazing. I remember doing the big whiskey show up in Massachusetts.
Rye
Julio's one? Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah. That just happened this past weekend.
Yeah.
Cool.
And holding a tasting there, and it was standing room only down below to taste these whiskies that we had, and I think I was following. There was some great people doing tastings down there, and I was really bricking it, because this room was just rammed. It was like the first time boutique whiskey had been there, and there was the feedback was fantastic with the whiskies that we got. It's just, I guess, just the way of working in the US is a little bit more challenging than it is. We can't just go from deepest Mid-Bedfordshire with the bottles and then go to the next county and go, it's no problem. Every state is a different country, isn't it? So I think that's what we did learn rather quickly. Where did we? I did New York. That was a great show. We did a lot of fun. Had a lot of fun in New York City. Did a sort of trade tour of Florida, and that went really well. Everyone that was coming up to us was blown away by the very small selection of whiskies that we were taking on these big trade shows in hotels in Miami and Orlando and Tampa. Really interested in. I like this whiskey in our shops, but it's just a lot harder than I guess. I just go where I'm told. I say yes. If they say, Dave, can you go here? I go, yeah, of course I can. Let's do this and talk about whiskey. That's but getting behind it and all of the legislation and the restrictions and that's I haven't been involved with that, but I knew it was a bit of a mare. Yeah.
But you guys spoke at length about it on extra. Whatever.
Yeah, just yesterday it dropped. Yeah.
And so that your listeners know the problem, the challenges.
It's funny. I'm not going to. Obviously, I'm not going to release a name. But last night, I was having a conversation with someone who was talking about his brand was in Connecticut, my home state, and the distributor was doing nothing. And so he said to the distributor, "All right, that's fine. Can I move it to somewhere else?" They said, "You can. You'd have to pay us $150,000 to get your brand back."
Oof.
And and that's legal to basically rape someone for money when you're not doing a damn thing for their brand. And so with that in mind, did you find you were running into that? Where obviously you've got great whiskeys, you got very cool labels. You've got a reputation. Obviously, when you came to the U.S. and you went to Julio's, the reception was fantastic. But did you run into situations where maybe the distributors didn't care, or you had a bigger fight on your hand than you expected? I guess is what I'm asking.
100%. We're a batched business. And you guys can definitely relate to this, but you went around the system, not around the system, but you built your community and built your route to those people, which is the way to do it in the U.S. But from coming from abroad, obviously not with my accent from Canada, but with our products coming from abroad, they land one place, then they go to different distributors. They need to be ordered in. There's got to be a PO. All the things need to happen. And then you need to get the lowest common denominator. You need to get an 18-year-old guy who doesn't know anything about your product motivated to sell it when he's also selling Jameson Orange, where he's getting a free trip to Ireland, some tequila, where he's getting a free trip to Mexico. Why is he going to give a shit about a 1-year-old Rocktown from Boutique?
Yeah.
Zero. There's no way, and we can't afford to get his attention. It's not his fault. It's just we aren't built for that system, unfortunately. So if there was a direct-to-consumer route, which there was, Master Malt used to be able to ship to the United States, and Boutique itself, as well as all Master Malt products, did really, really well. Losing that is massive, so we went to try and get in directly with Boutique, and Boutique is a tough sell because there's 300 bottles of this particular thing, and then they're gone, as you can relate.
Yeah.
So it's a very tricky thing to go through the tier system and to go through normal channels, I think, in the US. So we've come back now, as you outlined, Jason, with our more continuous product. So World Whiskey Blend, still a boutique product, but you guys have seen it. But World Whiskey Blend, in a 70, and then
70 CL. Okay.
yeah.
So you're currently covering my next two questions. So keep going, Sam. Keep going.
Should I let you have a turn, or we can hand?
No.
This is audio only. We could do hand signals. No one will know.
Nope. Keep going.
Semi-4 with the flags.
Air Like Lindsay,
yes.
peated 10-year-old Isla, Green Isle, blended Scotch whiskey, and then Darkness, which I just finished, so I don't have a bottle near me. But
So, sorry, do you consider those boutique products?
no,
No. Okay, those are separate.
World Whiskey Blend is a boutique product. Boutique bottles the whiskeys from around the world, and this is made to be drunk the way the world drinks whiskey, mixed. That's the idea of it.
What's your strength on that?
41.6, baby.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Drake? Anyone talking about Toronto's post area code?
Wow.
Oh, now we get it. Okay.
Wow, he's talking like Canada matters. Like, I don't understand what's happening here.
It's America Junior, Jason. It's America.
That's what I've been educated on since I've moved here, Sam.
You go count your elephants.
And so those four that you just showed, I know you didn't show the Darkness, but those four are coming in 70s. That's what's going to be.
They're all there. They're all there now, and they're already POs in different states. So that's already worked a bit better than the boutique did, because it's at least something that someone can spend a bit of time on and know they'll be able to get more for their customer, because their job is to to serve their customer. That's hard to do. Again, with you got 17 bottles of an Ardbeg. Come on, that's tough work. That's a tough sell. Doesn't sound like it on paper, actually. Now that I say it out loud.
17 bottles of Ardbeg's probably the easier one.
Yeah, that was a bad example.
Yeah. Yes, 20 bottles of Pininic, maybe.
Yeah, very pale Dalyuan.
Yeah.
And so I think the question that I know you guys answer all the time, and it really is the thing that comes up every time you talk boutique, with someone, and as you correctly framed at the beginning, Dave, we're all whiskey geeks talking whiskey with other whiskey geeks. Is why the 50? Why the 50 mil? And I know that was your number going out. Obviously, we got the 375s in the US because 500 mils isn't a legal size. Now you've got the World Blend coming into America in that 70 CL. What's the ethos for the 50? Because I know you're thoughtful guys, and I know you work with a thoughtful team. Can you give us the 50? Even if you just want to give us the 30-second elevator pitch that you've given a million times. I just want to frame that for the listeners.
Really, right from the start, the batches were very, very small. And we were literally trying to spread that parcel of whiskey that we had out to as many people as possible, which is why we did it. Because we've never been about collecting whiskey. It was originally put together because we're passionate about great whiskey, and we wanted to get whiskey out there for people to drink. We wanted to bottle these Macallans and these Port Ellens at prices that were affordable, because they were at the time. So people would drink them rather than put them on their shelves to collect dust. That was the bottom line. And some of these batches were very, very small. Yes, we sort of scaled up and went to big batches and went, whoa, no, we should be doing that. And we're not doing that. We are, most of what we bottle now is a single cask. these recent batches. Very, very small batches. I'm just trying to see what we did there. I think the smallest out term was 116 bottles, but most of them are around that sort of 300 bottles. And 300 bottles at 50 cl or 200 bottles at 70 cl sort of thing, that sort of ratio. So that's why. And we just want more people to drink more whiskey, different whiskey, rather than the same whiskey. Explore. That's what we're always about, exploring whiskey, which is why we're bottling whiskey from all over the show, because there's people making great whiskey all over the world now, and we want people to explore this. Some of these distilleries that we bottled would never come over you would never find them over in the UK. Certainly the Australian series, I'd only heard of 2 of those distilleries that were available, that you could find here. Starwood have obviously been waving their flag loudly in the UK. We're really at every whiskey festival waving their Australian flags everywhere.
That's a loud flag. I know. Thanks a lot. Oh, God, I can barely hear myself over that flag wave.
I couldn't hear it until I put my hearing aids in, but I never knew flags made so much noise. I remember sitting at the table when I first got my hearing aids, and there was a box of tissues on the table, because I'm a messy eater. And I pulled this tissue out. And did you hear that? And I'm sitting there pulling 1, 2, 3. But my daughter's looking at me, Dad, I didn't know tissues made a noise.
You got all ASMR with it, just pulling it out, making that noise.
You look like a magician in training.
Oh, that's going to come. That's going to sound like mac
I'd
and cheese.
move around the house like a ninja. But every floorboard creaks. You think you're coming home late at night, very, very quietly. I couldn't hear a thing. Since you've got hearing aids, and you can hear that everything makes a noise, doesn't it? I didn't know.
It's back to the 50 thing. Look, I think a lot of people are suspicious or cynical about it. For me, when I'm into exploring different whiskeys or taking a risk on something, it being at 50 cl and being a bit cheaper than a full bottle to try something is encouraging to me. This is before I came to the company. That's something I loved about Boutique, is I could try some weird thing, and if I wasn't a fan, I wouldn't have that extra bit. But if you are still cynical about it, it's okay. Just see the number, multiply by 1.4, and if it doesn't make sense to you, cool. There are many other great whiskeys to go by, but I think you will almost always see that it is comparable to a 70 cl price, if not less. In some cases more, because as you know, supply, some things are more expensive, but it's not some duping trick. It's about sharing and enjoying. That's why Ben and the team originally did 50 CLs.
Gotcha. Well, thank you.
You touched on what is my next question. Supply kind of sucks right now, especially when it comes to Scotch whiskey, single malt. The availability of casks. The availability of casks at what used to be proper pricing, and it's gotten a bit dire now. But you seem to have timed things well with a lot of this world traveling whiskeys. Was that a coincidence, or was that by necessity because of what was going on with Scotch whiskey?
That's a great question, man. No, I think it's just serendipitous. I mean, one of the first things I did when I got here at the end of 2018 was I wanted to make a world whiskey blend. We knew and we all knew, anyone close to whiskey, the Japanese whiskey rules were going to change. Japanese blends are beautiful. There is a rich tradition there, and I think why can't we all just embrace that and make world blended whiskeys, world whiskey blends, whatever you want to call them? So I wanted to do that because Boutique could be a great independent bottler in the tradition of the great Scotch bottlers, but globally. There weren't really people doing that. Of course, Cadenheads, of course there were examples of that, but to really consciously go ahead and do it was something we wanted to do, and we were drinking that way. Like Dave said, Dave's drinking Dutch ryes, Danish Edu, French buckwheat whiskeys. We're exploring those whiskeys anyway. And yeah, you're absolutely right, though. At the same time, things got a bit crazy in Scotch. I just pulled up an email I got yesterday. You might have got the same one, where only one malt on the list is allowed to be bottled under its name. And all of the prices on this particular list, I would say, are between 20 and 50% too high to be possible to bottle. in any.
I'm surprised it's that low, that high percentage is that 20%. Low.
Well, we got great connections. No, I mean it's things are crazy, and it's a bit frightening. I do think it's temporary though, guys. I think if we can get through it and work together, that's why we, maybe this is a bit too much shop talk on a podcast like this. But we want to work with guys like you and with a North Star and with Angus and get through this, and be an independent bottler for independent bottlers. We're not just buying for ourselves. If we can go to Ferry Lock and get 3 casks, we'll bottle one, and maybe we can hook someone else up. But if we get stuff directly from Pernod or from Diageo or whatever it might be, if we can protect that stock and make us all rising tide, which is a thing that I definitely learned from Scotch whiskey. That's how Scotch whiskey grew, and why there are over 100 malt distilleries still today is because they've operated in this way. So we would be naive not to take some of that wisdom and apply it to trying to make sure that world whiskey can thrive.
Absolutely on this topic. I know that you were part of the selection process for the Judgment of Westland. And we had Steve Hawley on here, and Joshua and I tasted through the samples. And I don't have to reach very far to show you 2 of the 4 that I've still got sitting right beside me. Could you talk about why you wanted to be part of that process and what you think was achieved? I know, again, towards the end of February, the results came out. Between about 3.1 out of 5 and 3.3 out of 5 was the scoring for the 4 whiskies. Could you talk a little bit about your experience on that?
First, I would just say, when you look at the results, we all love the way it turned out, especially Westland, who put the program forward. But just remember, in any scientific analysis, that's not enough of a point of difference to be consequential at all. So basically, all whiskeys equal, I think, is what I would take from that. I hope 100%. I hope most people who see the results see it that way. Well, look, you may remember when I was at Balvenie, we tried to always push to do a bit brave things for single brands. We had a whiskey shelf that we spent all this money and time on, making this online app that you could have on your phone to keep track of not just your Balvenies, all whiskeys. And that was controversial. I mean, that was a hard sell for me to convince my colleagues to do that. For me to go do events where I hosted Abel hours and other things while I worked for Balvenie was a hard thing to sell. But I've always been a major advocate for that pan whiskeyism or whatever it is. I don't know. See, the biggest brand in whiskey is the word whiskey. It's not a single named. It's not Macallan or Glenfiddich or Westland. And probably the second biggest is Scotch whiskey. Those are the brands, and we all espouse them. We're all working for that group. So when Westland very bravely had this idea, and Dave mentioned it to me, I was like, "Fucking right, I want to be a part of that. That is so cool." And so New World, and so West Coast, and so pioneering. And I've been to Westland twice. I brought groups of 3 times. Twice with my Balvenie crew when I worked there, because they had to see the place. They had to meet the people. It had a special place in my heart for what the future of whiskey could look like, So I always already liked Westland and Copperworks in Seattle. So 2 distilleries out there, just awesome people, awesome products.
Absolutely.
And what a great place to hang out anyway. So it was any excuse to go to Seattle. Almost Canadian, right? So as close to Canada as the States gets. Anyway, so Dave brought it up to me. I said, please, very keen to take part in any modest way I can help. It's such a cool thing. And that was basically it. And Steve was super friendly and open-minded, and again, super brave to take that sort of thing on, because it could have gone way wrong.
Yeah. We got shouted at when we did the recording with Steve, because Joshua and I, just as geeks, were just trying to place them, right? And his take in the moment was, no, don't try to introduce biases. Just tell us what you think of the whiskey. And Josh and I were both kind of saying, well, if this is the Indian, that doesn't bias us one way or the other. If this is the Australian, that doesn't bias us one way or the other. But I understand the way his concern was. Some people might have searched out the Scotch and then tried to grade the other 3 lower than the Scotch to hold on to biases. And given the way Joshua and I look at the world of whiskey, no, we were just really curious about flavour profiles and positioning and things like that. So Just as you were talking, I was remembering being shouted at, chastised on the podcast by Steve.
Yeah, but we're all guilty of that. I remember being of those sort of biases. I remember being at Lagavulin, and we're in the warehouse. It's the festival. It's some special tasting. I can't remember because I was probably half lit. And we're tasting some wonderful stuff and getting a great, colorful presentation. And it was incredible, as you could probably understand. And all right, we get offered, you're going to have one more dram, and you can pick the oldest cask in this warehouse or the best Lagavulin I've ever had. And what did the room vote for?
Hopefully not the oldest.
The oldest, yeah.
Of course they did.
Because even this guy who's worked there his whole life and has stolen from all of those casks, and I'm not accusing anything, or no HMRC, but his expertise was less valuable than our bias. That's crazy. And I saw the whole room vote that way, and it was eye-opening and a nice reminder. And geeks, I'm sure we've done it too, where you see a lineup of whiskeys. Oh, let's try that dark one, because we do it. That one must be good. So yeah, to wash those away as much as possible, to take part in some way to do that with Westland or with anything is always fun and worthwhile.
Yeah, I thought it was a brilliant. So you, Joshua.
Well, I was just going to remark. A month ago, 2 months ago, I saw a review of some whiskey. I don't remember what it was, and it saddens me. I have to look for it. But the thing that attracted me to the review was the picture of the bottle and the liquid inside.
Johnny
and
Walker,
said,
Year of the Tiger?
No, I said, oof, look at the lack of color. It was almost clear. And it made me want to try it so badly. And then I ended, then something happened. I saw a shiny quarter. I moved on. But I
saw the
think
Year of the Tiger label.
The bias can go both ways, especially if you're just curious about what's that going to taste like, where the cask gave zero color. And I think the decision to bottle a whiskey that has zero color is a pretty brave decision on the part of that bottler. I think that's really cool, because you're right, Sam. You look at a bottle, and if the color is as dark as this Bruichladdich that I'm holding up, you say, ooh, that's going to be fantastic. Meanwhile, this is the worst Bruichladdich I've ever had in my life. So color is not an indication of that quality of the whiskey, and it's back to that bias that we're discussing here.
Yeah, well, you asked about Boutique too, and Dave, you've said this before. The driving force between what we put in glass at Boutique is things that make you say, "Fuck, dude, you got to try this." That make you want to share it, and I think that's the requisite. That has to be. I mean, I've got one here, right? I got the Broger, Dave. Polarizing whiskey, tastes like nothing else on planet Earth. That's why I have to have it, because I have to show friends that come over. They have to enjoy it. And so Boutique, whether it's water white but still mature, or whether it's the opposite, it's super dark but just wildly inappropriate and disgusting and vomitous. I'm guessing that because it's a Bruichladdich. But
wow.
Listen,
I'm not editing any of that.
Dave, I've got a question for you, and then Joshua, I've got a plan to get us out of here. If you'll come along with me on this.
Oh, I will come along with you. Yes.
Coming whiskey, Dave.
Yes, sir.
I make no secrets about being very far from social media, and I've lost all interest in the genre, if I can put it like that. But I have Twitter on my phone, and there are only two reasons that I open Twitter of a day. Is number one, I want to see David Brody's view from the veranda at Bunnahabhain. And I want to see what's happening in deepest Mid-Bedfordshire with Dave Worthington. And when I look at those two things, I may see our beloved friend Ian Allen along the way to see how he's doing. And then I shut down Twitter. That's it. I'm out at that point. And I'm curious, because clearly Twitter is a cesspool and is filled with horrible people saying horrible things at every opportunity. And you and David Brody are such beacons of light. But I've wanted to ask you the question, what keeps you going back there? And I've got a hunch I know what the answer is, but what keeps you going back to Twitter, and how does your experience look on there?
We have a really, remember years ago there used to be the Whisky Fabric, with all those emerging bloggers back in 2010, 2009, and it was really a lovely space to be. Well, it still is a lovely space to be if you put in keywords to block. There are, my timeline is generally filled up with dogs and whiskey by blocking certain things. I don't want to know about anyone who gets their news off of social media. You don't want to hang around with them too much, do you? I mean, because you can... seriously, there's just so much shite on all of social media at the moment. And it really is. So, block words is something I do. And I block ads. So if people start putting advertisements up on Twitter, I block them. I block all the newspapers. Block. I don't block people. I very rarely. I mute people. Or mute keywords. Mute keywords, definitely, they don't want to see. But yeah, there is still a really lovely community of people on there, of drinks, writers, bloggers, enthusiasts, whether it be whiskey, gin, rum, anything. There is a really lovely crowd on Twitter. And I like Twitter because it is conversational. Yes, it's confrontational, but there's a lot of people on there are just there for shits and giggles. And that's what it's about, isn't it? Shits and giggles. That's what I'm on there for. And why be negative? I try never to be negative on social media. Always, because there's enough negativity in the world, so just try to lift it up. And I love Dave's weather reports from the island or the view from the balcony. Sometimes I do the same here, but it's not quite the same. I just do a little good morning with my coffee. I've got the music on. I'll just say hello to everyone in real time, just for a bit of fun. Change the hat, change the shirt. I try Instagram. Instagram is just putting pictures up and people going, nice. Do people read everything that's underneath it? I don't know. There's very little conversation on Instagram. I'm trying harder. And Facebook, oh God, I'm not a big fan of that at all. But it's really just to keep in touch with a few friends around the world. Twitter, I do still like Twitter. You're right, there is an awful lot of negativity on there. But you can block it out just by blocking certain words, so you never see a tweet. I don't want to know about NFTs. NFT, no fucking thanks. I don't want to know. NFT is no fucking thanks. And so I just block NFT or anything like that. It never comes up. So dogs, I want to see dogs. I want to see puppies. I'm not too bothered on cats, but okay, they can come through.
I'm gonna think of no fucking thanks every time I see NFT going forward.
100%.
One of the things that you're describing there, and that I'm most proud of, and Joshua is in charge of that, along with Jess and Elijah, but is our nation members only Facebook group, where you have to answer a series of questions to get in. And one of those questions is, I will not be an asshole in this group. And it's that sense of you can just come in and talk whiskey. And, you don't just have to talk single cask nation whiskey in there. You can just geek out about whiskey. Just don't be an asshole is the guiding principle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's that rule, isn't there? Don't be a dick, and it applies to most men. You have to, you have to think, don't be a dick. I say it to myself. Everyone should say it to themselves. Don't be a dick, because it's so easy to be a dick, isn't it? Yeah. It's on the inside of every hat. Oh yeah, don't be a dick.
I put it inside all my underwear.
So I struggle to understand why so many companies try to attract younger whiskey drinkers, because there are very few people under 26 who aren't periodically dicks. It takes a while to sort of get the humility of wisdom. And all of us, we're nice guys. I love you. I've known you since I was 26, I think. You know what I mean? But the likelihood of being a cock lowers with wisdom and time. So we don't need them in the whiskey world. And you guys, you just brought it up. It's worth saying again, the community you've created is incredible and a thing of admiration for not just us, but for all sorts of folks. Such a cool way that you organically grew and became this nation that you are. It's super awesome.
Cheers. That means a lot. You know, you're a person that we mention a lot and as an inspiration. And so the fact that you are so kind about what we've achieved is very, very cool. Thank you.
Just wish I was Jewish and into whiskey. I could have been a part of it from the beginning.
Wait a second.
Wait a moment.
Thanks to Sam and Dave for their time there. Sam and Dave and Sam, the Boutique Boys, a bit like the Hardy Boys in my mind. Ton of fun. As we said leading into the interview, I had a chance to get geeky, had a chance to get passionate, had a chance to explore some of the changes they've made over the years as a company. Learned a ton, and of course had a blast just simply hanging out with them.
Yeah.
They are two guys who were hard to get pinned down for a date. But once we got the date, we followed through and we had a lovely time. And as we said, we will return to them in a little bit in this episode.
And just really quickly, apologies to any of our listeners out there that were expecting us to speak to the musicians, Sam and Dave. We didn't try to do a bait and switch, but here we are. We're talking to whiskey people, Sam and Dave, not musicians from the 60s and 70s, Sam and Dave.
Or for our British listeners who maybe are thinking, wasn't there a UK duo somewhat similar? Chaz and Dave were big in the 1980s. Yeah, they've got a song called Rabbit that was pretty big. I played it for you. I played it for my boys. And in one point, it talks about the wife being good looking, but God, if she'd only just stopped talking. And that was a very 80s sentiment that has not aged at all well. And I remember it being so popular. So popular. So yeah, if you want to go down your own little quote unquote rabbit hole, go look up Rabbit by Chaz and Dave, and you will get an education in what was allowed in 1980s United Kingdom.
Well, I'll tell you, rewind the clock to the 60s. Do you remember that band? Oh, I forget the name of the band, but it goes, the chorus goes, if you want to be happy for the rest of your life, never make a pretty woman your wife.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It was all like, and then like in the middle, in the breakdown, the guys are all talking, and he goes, oh, whoever, I saw your wife, she's ugly. And they're all excited about how ugly their wives are because they still make a good meal. They can't find any other men to pick them up. They'll never leave you. Wow.
It's a lot.
Misogyny was so popular back then.
Yeah. Thank goodness it's gone away. Thank goodness. It's not a thing anybody has to deal with any longer.
Yep.
And especially not in whiskey. So, phew-wee. He said sarcastically, since you can't see my face. I saw this thing. Again, I've been mentioning QI this season of the podcast, but on QI, apparently, a little bit of research was done. You can say anything on Twitter, and if you're being sarcastic, you must include a winking emoticon, a winking emoji. So yeah. I'm inserting a winking emoji in this portion of the podcast.
So I feel as if that's like saying you can say anything you want, so long as it's preceded by, with all due respect.
Do you know how much that cost us in sponsorship dollars?
Well, with all due respect, Mr. Dennett, I had no idea you'd gotten experimental surgery to have your balls removed.
What did you say? What was that?
Well, I said with all due respect.
That doesn't mean you get to say whatever you want to say to me.
Sure as heck does.
No, it doesn't mean that.
It's in the Geneva Convention. Look it up.
Or no offense.
But...
Yeah, well, we had to teach when our eldest was 7, we had to teach him that lesson. He absolutely thought if he led with no offense, he could say absolutely anything. And we had to say to him, that's not how any of this works. Like,
Wow.
But I said no offense. Well, I really appreciate that, but that's not how any of this works. So please stop. And to his credit, he did stop. He did take it on board. It was the last time he listened to us.
This episode, Jason, I think because we're having this sort of longer game that we played with Sam and Dave, we're not going to bring an email into the podcast, though I think we do have one to get to. Maybe we'll get to that email in the next episode. But we have just a smidge of news that I want to share with people. I know I've got one bit. Maybe you have another bit, or maybe your bit is the same as my bit, and we'll say the bit together.
I'm still thinking about Sam Simmons' penis. It's always the penis with you, Joshua.
See, now I have to include all the stuff that I was going to...
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. That's how I do this.
Extra, extra! Read all about it! Life story of Playboy Penny! Extra, extra! Extra, extra! Read all about it! Me and that Playboy and Penny...
In about 35 minutes, Jason, you and I will stop recording here, and we're going to hop in front of our cameras, and we will begin recording a tasting video for our Virginia Distillery Company single malt. That's our 5-year-old matured, all 5 years, in a Spanish oak sherry butt. That cask having previously held Oloroso and having previously held Pedro Jimenez sherry. And we got, 613 bottles out of cask 666? And that cask will go on sale somewhere toward the very end of April, beginning of May, somewhere within that vicinity. And so I wanted to let our listeners know about that. Because there are so many bottles, this won't go on lottery. So I urge you all to check out our YouTube channel, Single Cask Nation, and look for that Virginia Distillery Company video. This whiskey is truly, truly fascinating. It reminds me a little bit of what we've brought this up before, but I was reminded of it reading Angus, Whiskey Sponge Angus, his April Fool's post, when he gets serious. And he talks about the fact that whiskey writ large is simply much better than it ever has been. However, it's very few and far between that you get these whiskeys that absolutely floor you, that remind you of why you drink whiskey, why you went down the rabbit hole in the first place. And I really think that this particular cask, and this isn't to cast shade on any previous casks that we've done, but this is an eye-opener. It really is a reminder of maybe not necessarily why you drink whiskey, but I think that this is a good example of why American single malt is a category we need to pay attention to, because it is so expertly made and so wonderfully complex and satisfying, and it urges you to return to it.
And I think it speaks to why we continue to discover whiskey. And so this butt sat across Afton Mountain from me for 5 years. I hadn't visited the distillery. I hadn't met anyone associated with the distillery. And it's literally an hour and 5 minutes from my front door. And it's easy to get into your comfort zone, right?
Yeah,
Well, I know Catoctin Creek. I know Smooth Ambler, right? And then farther afield, we know Westland. We know Copperworks. And then farther afield, we know Glenmurray. We know Arran. There's a reason to keep discovering.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you bring up Angus, and I'm glad we covered it in the last episode of Extra Extra. And that point really did resonate with me, which is we're always searching out those whiskies that reinforce or remind us why we're doing what we're doing, what it is, what we do, that we do, to coin a Joshua Hatton phrase from a few years ago. And it is exciting. And when I tasted this, it squarely put Virginia Distillery Company on my map. And we got to speak with Amanda over there at season 5, episode 15.
That's the very one.
And she and I tasted the sample, the cask sample, in that interview as well. And so if you missed that or you skipped over that, I implore you to go back and listen to that as well. But I think it's an exciting distillery. It's a beautiful distillery. They are working their tails off to produce the best American single malt. Some might say the best single malt that they possibly can. And I'm excited to bring this to the attention of the nation and share this far and wide.
So my question for you is, was my bit of news the same as your bit of news?
So I just want to quickly revisit something that our worst fears were that it was going to become a moving target, and it has become a moving target. But our backwoods distilling heritage rye from Yakindanda in Australia, matured in Australian Shiraz, that again, and I really, really mean it, as excited as we are about the Virginia Distillery Company, we're as excited about the backwoods that we can show to people and put, again, another distillery in front of a nation member and get them as excited as us. But that cask was coming early March. That date was moved to late March. And now we're sitting, being promised early May, which neither you nor I have any confidence in.
Zero confidence.
Could move into the summer. And it's just sitting at sea. It's traversed an ocean, like Liam Bree at Backwoods, they did their part of this. Our good friends, our partners at Impex, our importers, they did their part. You and I did our part. And it's sitting on a boat in the water, waiting to come into port. And there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do.
Absolutely nothing. Yeah, we are held captive. But here's the thing, Jason. Our shipment, so many other shipments, we are a grain of rice amongst a gigantic...
A cork in an ocean.
We are a cork in an ocean. Yeah. There you go.
A cork in an ocean, caught by the currents. So, there you go. That's the update. The update is we have no update aside from the update that says the date's moving, but we don't have an update on an actual date. And so it's just an update to let you know that we're still waiting on the date.
We know what
just tells the date, Joshua.
It just tells the date. What's the date? Just tells the date,
Joshua.
What I can't wait for is when the shipment finally arrives to the port and the dock workers say they can't give us access to the container, and we can't go and pick up the container ourselves because there are very specific chassis used to move these things around, and then they start charging us a daily fee for something that they can't do and won't allow us to do. That's the part that I can't wait for, Jason.
Why are you making me even more sad? Why are you doing this to me? That's cruel and unusual punishment.
Oh, I was just playing the part of Jason. I mean, this is what you do to me.
It's going to get worse before it gets better. Let's be honest here. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets a lot better. So that was the news. Two casks that we're very excited about, that are first time bottlings for us, that we're eager to share, and we just keep plodding along with them and get them out to you. So with the news said, and with me questioning every professional career choice I've made, how about a bit of fun? How about a bit of FUN?
I'm all about fun, Jason.
So a few episodes ago, I played a little game with you where I had...
And I still can't find the sausage.
It is well hidden. Well hidden. We broke out the first edition Michael Jackson Malt Whisky Companion.
Yes.
And I read you a tasting note for a distillery that is near and dear to your heart, but I knew it had enough head fakes in it that you probably wouldn't get the distillery, and that would be a lot of fun for me. And so we played the same game with Sam and Dave and you, and I once again got to play compere. I got to be the chap reading the distillery description and the tasting notes. And that's fun for me because it doesn't put me on the line. Mm-hmm. So I'm just listening carefully to the responses from the three of you. But as you said way back in the beginning of today's episode, Sam just was eager to get the game on. The game was afoot, as Sherlock Holmes famously says. And so without further ado, let's jump into that portion of the recording where we had a little fun.
Beauty.
A little FUN. So we have for the last few years we've got out of our interviews by asking people what they're most excited about going forward, and we're changing it up. So all the way through this interview we've talked about the future of boutique. We've covered that ground, and so in the spirit of the games that you chaps are known for, I've put together a little game that Joshua and I sometimes play on the podcast. But in terms of when we're recording this, you are the first people we're recording this with.
Oh, cool.
And so I have delved into my 1989 Michael Jackson Malt Whisky Companion. And I've got...
No cheating.
All right, I won't go grab mine. I know. I'm doing the same.
No grabbing. Come on, boys. And so I'm going to read his description of a distillery, and then I'm going to give you a tasting note. And
so, like his summary, what he says about the distillery, that short. Yes, this is a great game.
The house style.
And then it's not going to be first hand in the air. Let me read what I'm going to read, and then I'm going to ask each of you what you think it is. Please show you're working, okay? And I'm going to.
Am I allowed to play, or am I just?
100%. Joshua knows nothing. Yeah, Joshua
if you don't
doesn't
know
what I'm about to do. So. Sam's got
I'm fucking into this. I am so.
Notes.
This is right up my street.
Competitive.
No, it's not about winning. I like the
not about winning.
I like the game.
It's not about destroying you.
No, I don't care at all. Honestly, Dave knows I'm not competitive. It's more just the joy. You know, when people put whiskeys in front, they go to the bar, they get 4 whiskeys, they put in front of you, don't tell you what they are. That's the best night out of the year. Love it. Thank you. Anyway, go ahead.
We do that every time we hang out with Ian Allen. Every single time.
Yeah, and I don't want to be right. It's not about being right. It's about the journey. I love it. Anyway, go ahead, please.
Okay, here we go. And I'm going to try and not read the name of the distillery if it appears. I'm also going to leave out details that just are too much, that you would get too easily. So, sackcloth, Hessian, proclaimed one taster, admiring the distinctive aroma of this malt. Flax, perhaps? Fresh linen? Newly made beds? Gorse broom, says another admirer. It is certainly an individualistic whisky and inspires flights of fancy, if not Tom Jonesian fantasy. Maybe it is the aroma of seaside sand dunes covered with rough grass and gorse. Skips a sentence. Skips another sentence. I'm going to give you some dates, and it might give away the game, but I like them. It was founded in 1875, bought by Highland Distillers in the 1890s, and completely rebuilt in 1960. much of its malt, remember this is a quote from 1989, much of its malt goes into blends like the famous Grouse, Cutty Sark and Lang's. There has been the odd bottling of a single malt at 5 to 7 years, but with no age statement, primarily for Italy. And then there's a sentence that might give the entire game away, but with the information already provided, the distillery has been temporarily closed since the mid-1980s. and Sam's nodding his head. So
well, because
I'm going to give you two.
This is published. Yeah. Okay. No. So this place is open again, isn't it?
So don't show you're working just yet. So yeah, the book is 1989. So tasting note. The tasting note is for this distillery. No age statement at 40% alcohol. Color gold. Nose fresh linen. Body light but firm and smooth. Palate grassy, sweetish. Finish gentle, drying slightly, and that warranted a 76 from Michael Jackson. Now, that was the OB no age statement distillery bottling. This is now a Gordon MacPhail Connoisseur's Choice 1967 bottled at 40% alcohol. Color full gold, nose fresh, grassy, body light to medium, palate complex, drier, but with notes of sweet grassiness, heather honey, peaches, finish, gentle, dry, warming, long lasting. That warranted a 77. There you go. That's this distillery.
It's tough.
It's funny, on the words alone, it definitely sounded like it was more than a 77 if the other one was 76.
Exactly.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
I'm glad you bring that up. So, Dave, what are you thinking? And even if you don't want to guess a distillery just yet, what are you tuning into in those descriptions?
Italy was one thing that I tuned into, and that sent me down the Speyside distillery that's in Rothes.
As soon as I read that line, I knew this was going to be in the game because it totally blows it up.
Because it just straight down there. But then I was thinking, wow, is it? But that linen sort of comes through, and then that heather, and that takes me out towards Aberdeen. And there was a distillery, but I think that was a little bit earlier that closed. And there was a silent period for a number of distilleries in the 80s. Crikey, so many of them that were silent, and one of my favourite distilleries. And then Gordon MacPhail came into it, and that's with their distillery label series. But I just don't know if it's going to be that one that's my favourite one, if it is. So yeah, I'm confused. Yeah.
So to reiterate for your benefit, the 1967 is the Connoisseur's Choice that he tasted. I don't want to be guilty of misleading you in any way.
Yes. So I'm thinking Speyside, but
okay.
But no,
okay.
There wasn't many
Sam knew what this was, and then he bottled it. There's a detail in here that has got Sam completely rethinking his original. What has you rethinking this, Sam?
The longer you spoke, the less I became, I became less confident with every word that spilled from your gorgeous tongue.
Thank you.
Highland Distillers, and closed in the 80s, and then the mention of Grouse. Yeah, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Cuddy. Ooh, wait a sec. But the real clincher was Lang's, and I'm choosing my fingers carefully. So that pulls it away from a certain
finger.
Yes. Yeah.
For the listeners at home, that was my fuck you finger. Which pulls it. Sorry, what I was saying was the Cuddy and Grouse keep it in one stable of distilleries, and the Lang's pulls it away from that. Not that I know what that is, but it definitely cancels out those ones for me. And then the other thing you said right off the bat, I think, was flax. And there was something else he said. I wrote sackcloth and Hessian, but that's not the one that brought me there. And then young and Italian. I can see a label, a yellow, very plain label with brown writing that starts with the letter G, and that's probably where I'm going to guess if we're all guessing at the end of this.
Okay, Joshua, let's hear your working, and then I'm going to come back and go distillery from each of the three of you. Joshua, what's your working?
Okay. Well, so I had a few things to consider. I thought I was going down one direction until you mentioned coastal sand dunes. Okay, wait a second. Coastal sand dunes. That's pulling me away. Is there some sort of peat going on in there that's allowing you to give that note? And then I started thinking, okay, the distillery was completely rebuilt in 1960.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. So many were.
And then I got to thinking, well, I know a distillery on Isla had a bit of a rebuild, but I can't remember the year off the top of my head. And
a lot of them were built in 63.
Yeah. Okay, so there you go. And then the Italian, right? The Italian thing and the 5-year statement. Like, okay, but
no age statement. No age.
Oh, no age statement. No age statement. Okay.
Although I will say what you're quoting is there has been the odd bottling of a single malt at 5 to 7 years, but with no age statement, primarily for Italy.
Okay.
But yeah, the label itself, no age statement.
And then the whole time that you're reading everything off, just watching Sam like writhe in his chair, like what?
I love this.
Like this whole thing has been like wonderfully delicious to listen to and to watch.
I looked up just as I was delivering peaches and saw like a storm cloud pass across Sam's eyes. Like, where the hell did peaches come from and all of that? So
is it a Glen? Is it a Glen?
Yes.
I'm not going to say.
Oh.
Yeah, I think I have an idea. I have an idea.
Okay. I'm going to keep the
4
same
Glens
order.
Written down.
Yeah, Dave, give us a distillery.
I told you I was down the Glen Grant route for a little while, and then I thought the connoisseur's choice, the Gordon MacFarlane. I think, could it be Glen Tockers? They closed for a little while. When were they founded? I can't remember. I can't remember if it is. I thought it was a little bit later than 1875. And Glengarry, but that's earlier, much earlier. Glengarry, that was when the heather came in. But I thought, no, they were much earlier. But there was a number of distilleries that were closed, but I don't remember being rebuilt.
Yeah.
And the sand dunes.
Okay. Give us one. If you had to hang that beautiful hat on one.
Glen Glassock, because of it's what Rachel Barry was going on about a little while about the sand dunes and the. Is it Glen Glassock?
Okay. We've got one coastal entry. Glen Glassock from Dave. Sam.
I took a picture of it a little while ago.
I'm so glad I got that text from Dave just in time. Yes, I'm also going to say Glen Glassock. I'm just kidding. I've got no phone. I'm just kidding.
I'm like, wait a second.
No, close in the 80s. I'm gonna, and the other clues what we would Langs. I'm gonna say the same. I'm gonna say Glen Glassock.
Okay, Joshua, we've got 2 entries.
Gosh, it's so funny. I hadn't even considered Glen Glassock until you mentioned Glen Glassock.
See, this is why I thought about people writing it on a piece of paper and just holding it to the screen at the same time.
Yeah, we should do that next round. That's good. Tell me there's another round. It's the fucking best.
So we got. You're going to have to come back for a second round. So here's Joshua's thinking right now. If I name something that they haven't and I'm right, I am going to be so fucking brilliant. But if I name something that those two haven't and they're right, I'm going to look really foolish with my guess. This is what he's weighing up right now.
Well, it's, this is the tough bit. Being, the third smartest person amongst this group here. I'm not including you, Jason.
I was going to say, I don't know who just got demoted to 4th there.
You know, I hadn't considered Glynglassa, and now it really does seem the most likely. And the fact that it was shuttered in the 80s, of course, it went through a few periods of being open and closed and open and closed, but I don't remember if it was completely rebuilt. Mother brother. All right, yeah. I'm going to say Glynglassa. I'm going to say Glynglassa. I'm going to say Glynglassa as well. I'm taking like the wimps. I did want to say Glengarry. I really did want to say Glengarry because of that coastal sand dune and the fact that they used a bit of peat. However, they always had a jalapeno pepper note in there, and I didn't hear him mention jalapeno pepper. So
I don't know if Michael Jackson knew what a jalapeno pepper was in 1989.
Oh, he knew.
I don't think they've made it over by then. Yeah.
Okay.
Wreaked havoc on his body.
The two sentences that I omitted, I'm going to read in reverse order. The distillery is between the Spey and the River Deveron, just a little closer to the latter.
Aye.
This is a seaside malt produced near Portsoy on the coast of Speyside.
Nice, Dave. Yeah, you helped me with that, Dave. You pointed that out. I missed that. Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. Glynglassa Distillery. Brilliant, chaps. Yeah. Absolutely brilliant.
Wow.
I know I did have a second one in the barrel, but I'm afraid we have to call an end. I didn't want to cut short everything we were doing with that first one, but I'm going to save I've got another one that I'll pull out with Joshua.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
But that went
easy.
Even better than I could have imagined, and I imagined it was going to be brilliant.
It's a great game.
That's really clever.
Great game.
That was really, really clever. Yeah.
Awesome. So what? Go on.
I had Bunna going down, Cutty Sark, and Glenrothes, and all the Glens. Yeah, that really had me.
What I was hoping for, and when you started talking about it, Joshua, for that 1960s rebuild, and you started saying, sand dunes, and I thought somebody would start thinking Kalila, although Kalila was a 1970s rebuild, the 1960s kind of, and I think when you know the name of the distillery, all of the years seem really obvious. And so it was pretty good watching the three of you, that when you don't know the distillery, those years are like, there was a bunch in the mid-80s, and yes, there was a lot of rebuilding in the 60s. Was it 60 itself? I learned a lot from doing that with you, chap. So, sincere thanks. It's been
this has been
brilliant having you on. You should both come on much more often. The fact it took this many months to get you here, I at least want to be speaking to you two once a year.
Well, why don't we just start a whole new podcast? You guys have enough of those yet, or?
My wife will fucking kill me. Is the God's honest truth.
Thanks once again, and ever so much to the wonderful Sam and Dave. It was such a treat sitting down with you both again, talking a bit about whiskey, learning from you both, and playing the game. That was, I liked being able to play along with you, and I'm hoping, Jason, that you may hand the reins to me at some point, because I want to see you in the hot seat. I want to see you guess, and I want to see you deal with the head fakes.
We'll have a chance. We'll have a chance to do that. I've got some other plans up my sleeve. Is that where one stores plans up one's sleeve?
Yeah, in the wizard sleeve. Yep.
Oh, that's the trouble. All your plans fall out of your wizard sleeve. You need a bit of elastic on your wizard sleeve.
You need a little bit of a little tightening, as they say. So that's it.
Today has come and gone.
It has come and gone. Jason, I'm going to raise my glass to you.
Cheers.
I'm going to raise my glass to Sam and Dave and to our listeners. And I think that's it. I'm done raising glasses.
I tell you, I couldn't raise my glass any farther. If I raise it any farther, I'm going to find that sausage. So let's get out of here.
Cheers.
Cheers. Boom.
Boom, boom, shakalaka laka boom, 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 shakalaka boom, boom.
Monday, April 11, 2022.
Was that a song for you in the...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Do the dinosaur?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. What, I would say what year, what decade was that?
I don't know, because there was a remake of it. And so now I'm confused, because everybody do the dinosaur. I don't know. When were dinosaurs really big?
Ooh, every decade. Every.
They were biggest when they were alive.
And don't take my word for it. Here's the word of a 3-year-old.
I like Stegosaurus.
All right. We're going to do elephants or dinosaurs?
We are. You ready?
Elephants or dinosaurs?
Oh, let's do dinosaurs. Oh, I like that.
All right. Let's not fuck it up.
All right, here we go.
Pressure time.
And
1 dinosaur, 2 dinosaur, 3 dinosaur, 4 dinosaur, 5 dinosaur.
Not too bad for a couple of dinosaurs.
I'm so glad you're embracing this. It makes me so happy.
Ever since I have, that's been it. Like I'm pricing out coffins. I'm doing the whole thing.
What's the Emperor Palpatine like? Let it flow through you.
Yes, embrace your hate. Grab your saber, strike me down.
I feel like that now that you're going along with the old geezer stuff, like let it flow through you.
Oh God, I was feeling so young until I wasn't.